for decades. Julia Grosso from Vancouver to win it for Canada! Canada came! Canada conquered! Canada gold at Tokyo 2020!
You're listening to the Northern Football Podcast, your home for everything Canadian soccer, with Brendan Dunlop, Alex Gangué-Ruzic, and here's your host, Ben Steiner.
Hey there, folks, and welcome back into the Northern Football Podcast, episode 192 of NFP. Ben Steiner alongside Alex Gangué-Ruzic, Brendan Dunlop readjusting himself to Toronto. He's heading up to Ottawa for a bit with Rock, his son, and of course was on TV last night for the Vancouver Whitecaps' dull 0-0 draw with FC Dallas, with seemingly half the roster missing. But we're not going to talk too much MLS today, even though it was an exciting time in the league last night with just some chaos. But Canada's 2-1 win over the United States, first time since 1957 that Canada has found victory on American soil against the U.S. Alex, it was certainly an exciting game. Jonathan David seems to have a knack for shutting me up, I guess. But you didn't watch it live. You had your own Sunday League game.
Yeah, I let the game play out in its own due time. We had our season opener over here. It was VMSL opening weekend, and we went out. We got the job done, and I was able to tuck into the Canada game without in a good mood, good vibe, and that performance helped. But rough Saturday for you there as Jonathan David balls out, shows what he can do in that Canada shirt, and then Sam Adekugbe goes and plays and has a pretty good performance at BC Place and is now back in the squad. Maybe he'll see the field on Tuesday, just to remind you he's still there.
Yeah, it wasn't the best week for my takes, I guess. But I mean, I'm more than happy to see Jonathan David scoring goals and Sam Adekugbe just good enough to be able to, get onto the pitch for the CanMNT, or at least back in the squad after a positive performance with the Whitecaps for a bit. But we'll jump right into the questions from Michael Maz. Who would have thought that all it took for Canada to finally beat the U.S. on home soil was getting an American-born coach? And has Ben's opinion of Jonathan David changed after this goal? My opinion of Jonathan David has changed for now. I do still maintain that his form hasn't completely translated over to the national team all the time, but I think the biggest positive for me, and we'll get to it as well, was the connection between Kyle Larin and Jonathan David, where Larin should have had a goal. I mean, you could probably say that about his recent run of games, where he hasn't been able to find a goal. Jonathan David ends up tying him for the all-time lead in Canadian goals. But just to be able to get the victory and have some positive play between Larin and David was positive, and I think we can start to see that development of Stefan Eustaquio in the midfield as well. I mean, there was that early chance that David got on the volley and a fantastic stop there as well by the American keeper, but that came through Eustaquio controlling the ball, getting it to Larin, and a nice link up, and we saw that link up throughout. And it seemed like that was kind of the first time in a long time that we've seen that link up and a performance like that from Jonathan David in a Canadian shirt. Yeah,
I mean, I'd be curious to know what either Larin or David or Marsch would have had to say, but definitely what I'll say about the two up front is that it looks like someone, maybe it was a video analyst, sat those two down, showed them some clips of them almost stepping on each other in Argentina and said, hey, you go here, you go there. Because that's one thing I noticed. They did a good job of Larin played a little more like a traditional 9. He wasn't dropping deep too much, but he did on a few occasions. And David was just playing as a 10. And yeah, I thought David was excellent. His performance was nearly flawless. His touch was clean. He was finding some excellent spaces. He was linking up nicely. His passing was very good. He scored a great goal, great finish. Kind of used the Mbappe finish, I like to call it. Open up your hips and just smash it high in near post. We're seeing a lot more strikers start to use that kind of finish. And he was just everywhere. Like, that's what you want from Jonathan David. That's what he does for Lille, and I think he translated it perfectly over to Canada. And certainly him and Larin linked up nicely on a few occasions. Still, I was happy with Larin's work rate. To be fair, I don't think Larin's work rate has been an issue this summer. I think he's been working hard off the ball. Today, his link-up play looked sharper. What I liked as well is that he got chances that he was maybe struggling to get during Copa America. At the same time, I am also seeing a striker who's just lacking confidence right now. I think that first breakaway 3 years ago, he puts that away pretty confidently. That kind of shot, the way he took it, just kind of looked like someone who just wanted to get it on target and not worry about missing. Then the one where it fell to him in the box, again, just for him to take 2 touches and still kind of just slot it right at Schulte. Like, it's a striker.
First time. It's got to be first time.
First time, or if you take that many touches, put your boot through it. Like, if you have that much time in the box, don't mess around. Like, yeah, I think for Larin, it's confidence. It's confidence. And it's something where you also do wonder, like, this game could have been over in the first half. He puts those two away. It's a 3-0 game. You're laughing. And that is something to watch out for, because in a bigger game, maybe it's like with Canada-Uruguay where they didn't put away that game. They were able to see it out this game. That's good. All good and dandy. But again, Larin, you do want to see him put the game away. Yeah,
I mean, it was frightening to see that this game was 2-1 and the U.S., had their chances later in the game, especially as Aiden Morris came on and did impact the game against a country that he could have played against or could have played for. But when you look at sort of where Canada could have done better, that Larin chance stands out. The fact that Canada had 11 shots in the first half to the U.S. is 1. You want to get at least 2 or 3 goals on that, because it could have been a rampant win over the U.S. and even more navel-gazing for the American program. Maybe they, appoint Pochettino today if things had gone exceptionally badly. But, in the American fans that I've spoken to, it just seems like a lot are, that was boring, whatever, it's a loss to Canada, decent team, we'll move on, right? Like, there's not really a major takeaway from this from the American point of view. It's just, we'll get Pochettino in and we'll sort this out. But if Canada had gone out there and completely thrashed the U.S. on the scoreboard, I think we're looking at sort of a different outlook, both for the Canadian program with that confidence heading into the Mexico match and just, being able to beat up on an opponent, a rival like that, as well as from the American perspective where, that was probably one of their worst games of the recent history, if not long history. But it could have been a lot more wider of a gap, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's the U.S. It exemplifies where they're at and what they need to take that next step. They're a good team. They can play terrible and still be competitive. All it takes is 1 or 2 moments of magic. Maybe Pepe puts away his late chance. Maybe Balogun does a little better. Moise Bombito had him very well taken care of up front with his defensive play. And it's a close game, but that's the U.S., right? Like, they can compete with anyone in the world. We've seen it at the World Cup now. Maybe this summer at Copa America, even at Copa America, right?
Well, like, the draw against Brazil ahead of the Copa America team.
Yeah, the draw, they only lost to Uruguay by, what was it? It ended up being 1 goal, was it not? So I think for the U.S., it was 1-0. Like, for the U.S., it's not competing. It's that next step. And I think what's worrying for them is that, and what's very encouraging for Canada, you can see it be like it's just a friendly. Like, the give a shit meter was so high for Canada. Like, you saw what it meant to be in a friendly, and at the same time, makes sense. It's a rival match. Like, there's obviously, this means something for the players. They hadn't beat the U.S. in 60 years. You can see some of the players have been posting. Like, I think I've seen like 3 different players all make some sort of reference to like 57 or whatever, or however long it's been. They're like, oh, we got our win. So it clearly meant something to the players. You don't have to ask Jesse Marsch what it meant to him. Like, at the end of the day, this is a job he almost could have gotten the U.S. one. He used to play for the country, and he's been asked all week about like U.S., and he's been honest. Like, yeah, it means something. Like, Canada, their give a shit meter was very impressive, and it was good to see. But then on the U.S., the fact that you're not matching that when you're playing a rivalry game, and let's be honest, if you're the U.S., and something they might have to get used to, some of those players, this might be your new rival for the next 2 to 3 years. Because, Mexico, I know the rivalry with Mexico is going nowhere. Like, that's just historically always going to be there with what's the connection between the 2 countries and their history. But the reality is, sporting-wise, Canada might end up being their best rival for the next 2 years unless Mexico, drastically turns things around. So the U.S. is going to have to get used to this, because for Canada, like, this means a lot. I think if you're Canada, you're thinking, like, their dream is you're getting the U.S. in next year's Nations League final, and you're going to play the game of your life. So if you're the U.S., you're going to have to get ready for a Canada that's operating that way. And I know it's just friendly, but this is still something where you're a professional player. There's pride involved. I was a bit surprised to see that.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the give a shit meter was kind of through the floor for the U.S., and I think, none of their players are going to be extremely disappointed in this result, because a lot of these players grow up, and the big rivalry is that USA-Mexico rivalry. The fans are completely into that. But then we see, Mexico has fallen off fan-wise playing their games in the States. They'll finally play a game in Mexico, of course, but it has fallen off against, just drawing fans in the States because the Mexican program has been in such shambles and hasn't been competitive over the last little while. And so does that start to potentially wear off and the players raise their give-a-shit meter against Canada? Maybe we'll see that. But also, if you're going to have your give-a-shit meter at something worthwhile where you have a little bit of intensity in your game, you would think that the U.S. players would have it for Canada. Yes, it's Canada, the smaller country, our nice northern neighbors. And, it can be tough for Americans to get to that point. But it's going to be tough to get there against New Zealand, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we'll have to see what they put up. Because, again, I think if you're the U.S. and if you want something that was evident this Copa America and it's evident they need for the World Cup, so you gotta get that compete. Because I think on skill-wise, you look at that roster, you're not looking there. There's not that many holes other than in goal where they clearly got some question marks of who's the next guy there. But you look, I'm impressed with their back line. They got some great options in midfield. Up front, they finally got their guy in Balogun. But the reality is, and the big worry is that a lot of these guys are playing to a lower level in that U.S. shirt. And to flip it back to Canada, it's great to see Jacob Schaffelberg, who has been struggling lately genuinely with Nashville. His form's dipped. His minutes have kind of dipped. Nashville's been in terrible form, yet he puts on the Canada shirt and was phenomenal again last night, right? A guy like Ali Ahmed, who at the Whitecaps, he's been good for the Whitecaps, but there's been some, whispers from fans and people been like, Ali Ahmed could do a little more for the Whitecaps. And he goes out and he's one of the best players on the pitch in a game that includes AC Milan players, Bayern players, Crystal Palace players, all these players. And Ali Ahmed's like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and do that. It is also pretty cool to see, and I think that's something Jesse Marsch made some interesting comments about. He's really, one of the things that's impressed him the most is his guys clearly want to play for the Canada shirt right now. There's a clear desire to want to put on the maple leaf and go out and perform. And I think that also showed itself in some of the performances we saw that were from guys like, again, Mathieu Choiniere. A lot of questions of, he just moved to the Swiss league. What can he do? Well, if he keeps playing like this, I don't think anyone will care where he's playing if he keeps performing like that.
And that leads right into the question from Jordan SC. Who is more impressive, Choiniere or Ahmed? And does the two-striker combination only work against CONCACAF opponents? The thing about Ahmed or Choiniere, Ahmed I could see in the starting 11 moving forward. I could see him in a starting 11 in 2026. Choiniere, there's going to be options in that double pivot in midfield. However you line up, you're going to have those two midfielders in some way. And Eustaquio is going to be in there, so it's a question of who's next to him. Are we talking about Choiniere, or are we talking about Kone? Are we talking about potentially Nico Sigurd down the road, who I'm surprised we didn't see even for a few minutes against the U.S.? So that's where I see Choiniere. He was impressive, but I don't necessarily see him, elevating himself to a starting 11 level regularly within this team. For Ali Ahmed, I do. That's the path I see for him if he's able to raise to that level at the Whitecaps or elsewhere at club level.
Yeah, I'll start with Choiniere. I think he can offer something. I think he can. I think what's nice now is Jesse Marsch can look and be like, okay, I got different profiles. Now that if you go Eustaquio Kone, if you go Eustaquio Choiniere, if you go Eustaquio Osorio, or if you go Eustaquio Seager, you're getting 4 different things. Like Seager, you're getting another 6. Like Eustaquio, you get some freedom, go forward. Because Eustaquio, he almost scored a great goal yesterday. He pushed forward. He likes that. We know that. Then you have Eustaquio Choiniere. What I liked was that might be Canada's best, pressing defensive midfield. The way Eustaquio and Choiniere can press, it was help. That was a reason why that U.S. midfield was completely flooded. They started a pretty good midfield of guys like Musa, Cardoso, and I'm thinking back, I hardly saw those guys during the game. Why? Because Choiniere and Eustaquio were so good in their press every time. They were right on them. And then, of course, Eustaquio Kone. You get Kone's ball-playing ability. You get a little more progression. Okay, you got flexibility. So I think what's nice with Choiniere, he's showing that depending on the game state, depending on the opportunity, you can throw him in, and that maybe frees up Kone to play more as a 10, right? Or maybe that frees up different options. So I think Choiniere, what he's showing is that even if he's maybe not a nailed-in starter week in, week out, because it could be matchup-based, he's going to be in the squad and he's going to play significant minutes, because that could also be useful off a bench, right? Say you're trailing a game and you need to press. Well, it's nice to know you could put Choiniere in and you essentially get another guy who can press from a deeper position. As for Ahmed, what I'm curious to watch out for is he offers a lot of what Tajon Buchanan offers, right? Like that 1v1 threat. He can go wide. He can go isolate, etc. Great. But he offers something that Tajon Buchanan doesn't, in my opinion. And I think Ali Ahmed has that ability to cut inside and play like a midfielder and allows his right back to overlap. It draws defenders in. And Buchanan doesn't have that. And I think having seen Ahmed in this position a few times now for Canada, it makes a huge difference. 'Cause it's so hard to defend if you're a left back. If you don't know if one play Ahmed's going to run at you with the ball at 100 miles an hour and try to take you on like Buchanan does. But then also the next attack, he's going to cut in and combine with the midfielders and forces you out of the step. Or you leave him wide open in the half space to do dangerous things, right? He had like 3 key passes yesterday. So I'd keep an eye on that. Because if you can get what you're going to get anyways out of Buchanan and get that added layer tactically, Ahmed might make more sense for the right wing for Canada, and all of a sudden you're left wondering, like, where does Tajon Buchanan best fit? Is it a super sub, or does he need to get tried out on the left side? I'd be curious to see. Maybe Buchanan and Ahmed together could be the way to go. But then again, you got Schaffelberg, you got Miller, some pretty good winger depth coming together for Canada.
And the 2 strikers as well. I spoke on it a bit earlier that, Larin and David worked yesterday. But can that work against tougher opponents? We've seen them struggle. We've seen, David struggle against tougher opponents. That's, where my thought comes from in terms of his form at Lille not translating over to potentially in the CanMNT. But we have seen some success when Jonathan David or Kyle Larin have had the rare opportunity to play as a single striker or play stacked in some way or with another striker. So I'm not sure that the combination, even though it looked good against a low give a shit US team, is not. I don't think that translates to top opponents.
Yeah, no, I mean we saw it at Copa America. We've kind of been banging on that drum, and I think what's the tough part for Larin is, like, the fact that he isn't scoring, and you've got so many midfielders now, like I mentioned. Well, not so many, but you've got enough that are in the mix where Choiniere is knocking on the door showing he deserves to start. You don't even have Kone in the mix. Osorio, you know what you're going to get. Laren's also could be put in a spot where you wonder, all right, do you just let David lead the line and let, 3 midfielders try to feed him the ball and make sure he gets the chances? So, yeah, I think that's something where until we see a Larin start scoring goals, or even an Oluwasi or a Bear for Canada, I think we might see a bit more of that midfield trio going forward, and rightfully so.
From James U, set pieces. The CanMNT is still struggling at them. It just doesn't seem to be coming together. Of course, no Junior Hoylett to take them. It just seems like a puzzle that they can't quite solve.
Yeah, it's going to take time, but I guess what I do like is there's been some attempts to try new things, in the sense that, like, it's funny James asks about set pieces, because I actually had a thought watching the game, and I was like, oh yeah, Schaffelberg's been taking all the left-footed pieces. We haven't even seen Davies, like, pretend to step over one. Like, clearly Marsch is sitting there, like, trying guys out, like, okay, Jacob, let's see your delivery. Choiniere took a lot, like, okay, let's see what you can do, Mathieu. I guess maybe we'll just have to see if they can settle on a guy. But it is good to see them at least trying things. But yeah, you'd like to see a little more on some of these set pieces. And I think the big reason is, like, Bombito and Cornelius was pouring in goals for Malmo off set pieces. Bombito, he's 6'4" and he can be dangerous in the box. And Larin, right? Larin's still there. Canada should be more dangerous on set pieces. And I think really the big obstacle is finding that right guy to deliver them. So, I guess we'll see how the experiment continues. Like, who knows? Maybe Ali Ahmed has got some undiscovered skill in that regard. Maybe they're going to have to do something like turn Kone into one, but he's pretty good at getting on the end of, because he scored a set piece goal at Copa America, we can't forget. So, just got to find that right guy.
And from Jordan SC, was this the best performance we've seen from Bombito? He had Pulisic in his pocket the entire game. I mean, it's something that I think we've gotten used to with Moise Bombito, that he can play at an exceptional level and be one of those standout center backs. That's the reason that he made his way to Liga. It's the reason, he's been aggressive in Liga and got himself that red card. But he stands out, and, I saw it on Twitter yesterday. I forget who exactly was by, but could Bombito beat Davies in a foot race? Maybe. And the fact that that's even a talking point is a massive thing. He's still been the fastest player in MLS this year, and he's not even in the league anymore.
Yeah, I think what's most impressive is that he only really had to make 3 big actions, and that's a good news because that means for the most part he and his teammates rarely made any mistakes. But then the rare moments where one of his teammates stepped up or if Bombito made a mistake, he can also clean up the mess, right? He can make sure those mistakes don't turn into goals or penalties or red cards. And that's impressive because that can be tough for a defender, right? You can have a great game and you make one big mistake, you mess up, you get a red card, you concede. Disaster. What I liked about Bombito is there's a certain composure that, yeah, if there's a fire, yeah, there's a hairy moment, I can put it out. But that's his mentality. I think that's what's his best skill, even beyond his speed, his ball playing ability, etc. And I think that's what's going to help him so much at Nice adapt to that level, is that he's just got such a good mentality. So, no, shout out Bombito. He had Balogun struggling out there. Balogun was just fighting to get any sort of space. Pulisic as well was, not as influential as we're used to seeing from the Milan man. So shout out to Bombito and what he can bring going forward.
And from Paul Von Anderson, can this style of play for Canada and this high pressing be sustained against top teams, and have Schaffelberg and Ahmed cemented themselves in the starting lineup? In terms of the high press, we saw it. It worked at the Copa America, right? Like, they were in those games with a very similar approach to what we saw yesterday. The thing is, some teams are just simply better than Canada, like in Argentina, where if you're going to press them, well, in that first game, Messi had a couple moments. In the second game, Messi scores a goal. What are you going to do against, a healthy, borderline healthy Lionel Messi with Argentina and just those Argentine players, like simply better players. But then we also saw that they can be caught out a little bit in that third place game. So I think it does work, but the question is, how do you, even further elevate the players that are not at that elite level, outside of, a few that have started to make their way there. Of course, Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David are already there. Not everybody is at that level. They're not all in top 5 leagues. They're not all in top 2 leagues, but it's about how you can, adapt the style of play to even further elevate their level of play, because they've been elevated a hell of a lot, but to compete with, the top 3 in the world, you're going to need a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think for the pressing, it's gonna be a process, right? Because guys are also gonna get used to it. What I've noticed, and I think it's something that's kind of obvious, they just also need to take advantage of early, because it's something we've it's been obvious, and you saw it against the Netherlands, for example. They can really take over games for the first 30-45 minutes with this press. The U.S. were visibly uncomfortable in those first 60 minutes of the game, because every time they tried to play the ball in the midfield, they had a white shirt just draped all over them, trying to get the ball, trying to do something. And yeah, naturally they're going to gas out. But that's also where the next step is just, again, the depth. This depth is huge, because it's nice to know that if you have a Choiniere, Eustachio pivot, and if one of them gets tired, okay, you can turn to your bench and bring on hopefully a Seeger, right? Or you can bring on an Osorio to slot in if David Larin. You can bring on a Tanny to press and be relentless. You got Liam Miller to come on. And I think that's going to be key, is relying on that depth in a big way. But I think the avenue to success we're going to see for Canada is a lot of this US game is press, make teams uncomfortable early, get a goal or two before they can adjust, and then maybe you can rein things back. You can kind of play a little more cautious from there. So I think this model of pressing for 45 to 60 and then maybe seeing how the game goes from there could be a very sustainable model against the top teams, because we almost saw it against Argentina in the first game, right? Canada, for that first half, they were pressing, they were on Argentina, and then in the second half it unraveled. But had they scored in that first half, maybe that's a different game. So I think the strong starts are going to be the biggest thing if they're to press like this.
Yeah, and a lot of that will come down to strikers finishing. Hopefully we can see Jonathan David continue in that. If we can see Kyle Larin finish some of those chances, or potentially, a Theo Bair, Tenny Oluose, or other strikers that are, within that picture, if they can finish those chances in the first half when Canada's dominating, you're looking at a very different last 60 minutes of the games. And that's right into the question from Nick Spirit. Tanny seems to get a lot of playing time from Marsch, but he doesn't seem to make the right decision either with the ball, and his touch is poor. Are there not any other options off the bench? There are other options, but I think it's worthwhile, especially in a friendly, to give Tanny a look because of what he's been able to do with Minnesota.
Yeah, and I would disagree with the touch is poor. His touch has actually impressed me for a big guy, especially I've seen it a few times now. He's got a pretty good chest control. His feet are pretty good for someone of his size. I think for him, what I note is that he's at that stage where he's banged them in for Minnesota. He's clearly got that, but I think he's just going to need that first national team goal, and then things are going to click, right? You see that a lot with Strike. You just need that first one to go in and be like, oh yeah, I can score against the U.S. I can score at a Copa America. And unfortunately, Oluwaseyi, he's instead missed a lot of big chances, so he's still at that point in his head where he's like, I just got to put one away. So I don't mind seeing a lot of him, especially off the bench, because at the very least, he's bringing energy. He's getting into those dangerous positions. It's going to come. But also, there are some other options to look at. I would like to see Jason Russell the next game, right? He's been in good form for Columbus. Let him have a bit of a run, and maybe he scores, and he can get a bit of confidence at the national team level. There are some good options, and I think Oluwaseyi's kind of cemented himself as one of the guys you can turn to off the bench. Because even if he's not scoring, you've noticed it now. He impacts the game, and sometimes that can be very useful.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been fun to see Jason Russell against his goalkeeper as well. And maybe they should have had the goalkeeper, Patrick Schulte, on Columbus, considering what happened last night as well in the Columbus match. If anyone missed it, they ended up having to have a field player in net for 45 minutes, and then they lost 4-0 to Seattle and completely threw away any chance at the supporters' shield. But we'll leave that to another podcast. And we'll jump into our Mexico preview now as well. Of course, Canada taking on Mexico on Tuesday evening. And from VWFC, MCFC, what should the expectation be against the Mexican team? And I think it's very similar to the expectation against the U.S. team. You want to control the game, but you also want to finish more of these chances. We've been talking about the finishing through Copa America, the Gold Cup, like at every competition, it seems like over the last 5 years, we've talked about Canada's finishing. And that's been the issue again. But Canada's playing at a level where they're developing these chances, and it's, now they can finish these chances. Because previously we would talk about, they'd be struggling to make these chances, and then they'd get one or two, and they wouldn't finish, and then they'd lose, 4-0 or something like that. Whereas now, they're getting a lot of these chances, and they're still only winning by a goal. So I think it's get a solid, 2-goal win over Mexico. Maybe that's a little bit too bullish for, a team that still considers themselves the perennial power in CONCACAF and has been, the longtime power in CONCACAF. But I think that has to be kind of the expectation and standard for Canada in this game.
Yeah, I mean, hey, they still scored 2 against the U.S., and it could have been a 2-goal win had there been VAR for the potential offside shout on the De La Torre goal. But no, I agree. They should have put away 3-0 in the first half. What I'd say for Mexico, because I think this friendly against the U.S., if I were to rate it out of 10, this was a good 8 or 9 for me, because I think what I want in a friendly is a good team performance, and this one was a very good team performance. Pressing looked good, the transition attacks looked good, the defense, other than 2-3 errors, they're fine. There's always going to be 2-3 errors in any game defensively, not too mad about that. Team performance was great. Individual performance, I don't think anyone I saw had a bad game. You could be nitpicky about Kyle Aaron's finishing, but his overall game was good. That's a bonus, right? Because now Jesse Marsch is going to have discussions in a few months of Ahmed versus Buchanan, Schaffelberg versus, as a starter, Choiniere as a starter. That's good. That's what you want from friendlies. You want friendlies to make you think. They want to provoke potential thought. And then lastly, of course, the result. They won. So it was an 8 out of 9 out of 10 for me. I'd say just maintain that. Have another good team performance. Show that identity. Show that coherent tactical plan that they've been putting together. Boom. Give me some individual performances, be it from those we saw, another Ahmed performance. Won't be mad at that. Choiniere. Of course, selfishly, always love to see some new faces. If Nico Seeger has a great 30 minutes off the bench, sign me up. If Steven Afrifa does well, won't be mad at that. Tanny, if he gets a goal, sign me up. So more of that. And then, it would be nice to get a win. But what's nice is now that you beat the U.S., I think you draw this game, you're fine with this window. Although, for what it's worth with the FIFA rankings and everything and the ELO ratings, a win here would actually be quite good for Canada. So, go out after the victory and make it a really good window.
And for Matt Paternostra, would you still like to see the 4-2-3-1 formation going forward, or does this win show that they could have big things with the 4-4-2? I think it's opponent dependent, and learning to play in a whole bunch of different formations like this Canadian team has started to do, it will only benefit them in the long run. I think the 4-2-3-1 and 4-4-2 are so close in how they actually play that other than how they line up at kickoff, they're not incredibly different.
No, I'd agree. And what I'd say, I'm definitely team 4-2-3-1, and part of that reason is I want to just see David up front getting fed chances from 5 midfielders and the 2 fullbacks. That's selfishly what I want. But what I'll say about the 4-2-2, Jesse Marsch has there's been enough good performances with the 4-2-2 that I don't mind it. But I think for now, the 4-2-3-1 gets like a clear edge until another striker gets going with Canada, so to speak. Like, I think if Larin gets firing again, or if Oluwasi gets that first and gets some confidence, Russell Rowe, ditto. Like if Theo Bair was here and he gets some form for Canada, I think that's where the 4-2-2 could be a little closer in that discussion. I think right now, if you want to get the most out of this attack, I think just letting David on his own with like a 10, 2 wingers, just feed him seems to be the way to go, because David's clearly the confident guy up front right now. But we'll keep an eye, because I think if against Mexico Tanny gets that goal, this is a different discussion come October potentially.
And from Herbert Makila, after scheduling a home match against Panama, are there any chances that Canada hosts another game in the October window? Another home match in Montreal is long overdue. Seems like we talk about this all the time. I don't think that they would book another October friendly at this point, considering we're halfway through the September window. But I imagine Montreal, I'd love to see it. I'm actually surprised that the match against Panama isn't in Montreal, to be honest.
Yeah, that would have been nice to have, but I don't know. I'd still hold out some hope, because I think this could also be something that's a bit like it's going to be a longer term project, so to speak, or sorry, not longer term, but it's friendlies. Right? At the end of the day, we'll see what materializes. It is a bit tough, because you realize like how the US and Mexico got New Zealand this window, but then since they'll be playing each other twice, they're out of contention. I'd love to see them screwed. If Panama's all you got, give me Panama twice. If not, again, see who's available, anyone who you could fly out. If not, I just had the thought, again, it's outrageous, but it's not that outrageous. See if Montreal doesn't play that window. We've seen it, DC United played El Salvador last year. Do you do something as outrageous as a Canada versus CF Montreal friendly in Montreal?
El Salvador does that, though. They hosted Inter Miami earlier this year.
There's countries that do it all the time, right? I see it in Europe a bunch. Qatar before the World Cup played some European club teams. I mean, all I'm saying, it's a friendly window. If that's the only game you have available, I wouldn't turn my nose up at it, right? Because maybe it's something where it's a bit of I scratch my back, you scratch yours. Because if you're Montreal, the national team comes to town, it's good exposure. Maybe you'll have a couple Montreal guys playing on the national team. It could be a bit of a sell, right? But yeah, I mean, we'll see. They did say, that's why they did say when they announced the Panama friendly, they are looking diligently for options. Panama twice would be great, but if it's not, get creative, guys. It could be fun.
Maybe they should have a VMSL Second Division All-Stars fly out to Montreal, and you can line up against the likes of Alphonso Davies and Stefan Eustáquio. I
think for the sake of the viewers, I think I don't know if I want to get ran around by a bunch of professionals. We'll leave it at that. I'll keep it simple. I'll continue to watch and analyze the national team guys, and I won't have to share the field and embarrass them. But hey, if that's what's available, I'm sure they can get a pretty good Liga and Quebec All-Stars team, and that might be a little more competent than what I could do out there.
That's all we've got for episode 192 of the Northern Football Podcast. Make sure to rate, subscribe, review, all that good stuff on Northern Football. And of course, you can also watch our episodes now on the 90th Minute YouTube channel. Of course, we're part of the Nation Network, and Alex and I will be in studio as I head back to Vancouver for a little bit. And of course, Brendan will be in Ottawa, of all places, home of Rapide Ottawa, and of course, Atletico Ottawa as well.